graveyard session, ne? Thank you very much. Because the discussions are continuing and very interesting. Now, the last panel discussion that we're going to have today as part of session 4 is going to talk to policy regulating the built environment. Do we have all the speakers present, madam? Can you just confirm, because I don't see Jose. Where's Jose? Oh, if Jose is here, then everybody's here. How's that? How's that for a cheek? Okay. Without further ado, ladies and gents, let us take the last ounce of courage and the energy that we have and focus on this last one, because policy regulation is actually very critical in the environment that we are trading in. With South Africa having so many of those policies that are being put out there, when there's a problem, a new policy comes into play without having implemented the previous policy. So it's going to be very interesting how this one turns out. To moderate the session, we have got the BBCP CEO and also the BBC Vice President, and Tate Gregory Mufokeng, to come and join us on stage. Please do come on stage, Menier, and become the conductor. Let's welcome him. Thank you. And then to talk to us about the funding for built environment, the construction guarantees projects, we have got advocate, I think it's Jad van der Walt, who is the senior counsel. Jad is a senior advocate of the Meisels Group in Sandton. He's the vice chair, a director, a tutor, and a fellow of the Association of Arbitrators, Southern Africa. He's a fellow and fully faculty member of the CIIRB UK, and a listed international arbitrator, adjudicator, and mediator for the Association of Arbitrators Southern Africa, the CIIRB UK, the Civil Mediation Council in the UK, the Society of Mediators UK, and the president of the President's Panel of SAICI inter alia for construction, commercial, and contractual disputes. His practice includes commercial ADR and litigation with a focus on the law of contract in construction context. His industry-specific professional exposure of over 35 years includes construction, petroleum, coal and platinum mining, agriculture, food and beverage, telecommunication, forestry, pension funds, and banking. Ladies and gents, let's just welcome Advocate van der Walt to the stage. I'm sure we can do better than that. Thank you. And then our next panelist actually is even giving me his photos. Looks very nice. This is somebody who's serious about himself. Not one photo, 3. Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Kulilenzo, who is a senior professional quantity surveyor at Lakanya Quantity Surveyors, CC. As a registered quantity surveyor, he has full control of all aspects of quantity surveying, including business administration, construction project management, estimates, production of bills of quantities, tender reports and recommendations, financial administration of projects, evaluations, cost reports, and final accounts. Kulenzo is a founder member of Lakanya Quantity Surveyor CC, which has been in existence since 2003. Mr. Njo has accumulated over 20 years of experience within the built environment sector and provision of infrastructure. His considerable experience and vast knowledge of the sector will assure him as an asset. Kulilenzo has successfully planned and delivered various projects in various sectors of property and infrastructure-related projects. Throughout his career, his personal objectives have been around prudent financial control and administration in the delivery of construction projects. With qualifications in postgraduate studies in project management, his technical strengths are project management and client relations with regards to technical advice on project execution and implementation. His main focus and passion is in extracting value in terms of utilizing construction and infrastructure projects to address extensive development and socio-economic impact. He has over the years advocated for the development of small, micro, and medium enterprises in the industry. He has received accreditation as a mentor from University of Orange Free State in 2006. He further holds a Master's in Development Finance from the University of Cape Town. This is again in line with his passion for the development within the construction and infrastructure sphere. Can we welcome on board Mr. Kulilenzo? I am not sure why is it not mentioned that you are the chairperson of the CIDB. Something is missing. This must be an old version. Okay. Welcome, Mr. Nzo. Oh, we have got a thorn amongst the roses. This one is Ms. Jose Molishe. Jose Molishe is an energy and infrastructure finance specialist with 24 years of experience across sub-Saharan Africa. She is a founder and managing director of Rubik Pty Ltd, an energy consulting, advisory and training company. Jose has held leadership positions in the Department of Minerals and Energy, Development Bank of Southern Africa, Basil Reed Limited, Engineering, Procurement and Construction Contractor, Standard Bank and Industrial Development Corporation. As head of industrial infrastructure at the IDC, she structured the finance transactions in the energy, water, information and telecommunication technology ICT, and transport logistics sectors. She successfully completed her work on the regulatory review of the electricity market in South Africa towards crowding in private sector investment as a lead consultant with the United Nations Economic Commissions for Africa. She has played a critical role in the implementation of the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program, the REIPPPP, in South Africa. So she's a friend of Eskom. Ne? She is a non-executive director of Revego Africa Energy Limited, a limited partner that invests in renewable energy equity fund and independent investment advisory panel, member of the Synergy Pty Ltd, a subsidiary of Exaro Resources Limited, and a renewable energy power producer that creates bespoke renewable energy solutions to power the future. Jose also serves as a member of the African Women in Energy and Power, AWEAP Advisory Board. Jose is as an advisor, mentor, training facilitator at the Innovation Hub, 22 Sloan, and Global Women's Network on Energy Transition. She has a strong network in the renewable energy infrastructure and financial services sectors and is engaged at various levels within government, national power utilities, financial institutions, regional and international organizations. She is a respected energy sector expert and thought leader whose opinion and analysis are in demand. She has taken part in articles, radio, television interviews, including an analysis of the presidential address on measures to ensure long-term energy security in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, our hands together for Ms. Jose Molishe. Welcome, madam. All right, our next panelist is Mr. Chris Campbell. Mr. Chris Campbell started his career as a draftsman some 40, oh, Gosam, that was a long time, 40, and went on to obtain a higher technician diploma in civil engineering in 1986. Some of these CVs, actually, they make sense with why are certain people talking too much. It is because there's too much knowledge and experience. After almost 10 years in consulting engineering industry as a senior technician, he went on to obtain a BSc civil engineering degree, summa cum laude, in 1995 at a university in the USA. He has been registered as a professional engineer in South Africa since 1998. He has since obtained various certificates and diplomas in management and leadership, and subsequently held senior positions in various consulting engineering companies in South Africa, both technically and managed capacities in state-owned rail entity in South Africa, executive management in a precast concrete manufacturing supply company with operations in South Africa, Zambia, Swaziland, and Mozambique, before being appointed as the CEO of Consulting Engineers South Africa in 2015, which position he still holds at present. His engineering institutional involvement has been in various capacities over the past 25 years, both locally and internationally, which notably includes that of being past Vice President of the South African Institute of Civil Engineering, past Vice President of the Engineering Council of South Africa, past Vice President of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations, Chair 2021 FIRIC Directors, and Secretary Advisory Council. This CV is also not complete. Please come and join us on stage. And Tate Chris, can we give him a round of applause as he comes on stage? Thank you very much. Last but not least, we have got on our panel the President of Master Builder South Africa. Now, this is a complete CV. Musa Shange. Musa is a director of Corobrick, appointed to the board of Corobrick in December 2013. He has prior experience in the building and construction industry prior to joining Corobrick. His experience in leadership and more than 30 years experience in the building and construction industry served as HR manager, sales and marketing manager at PPC Cement, general manager at Saint-Gobain Construction Products SA, a French multinational, sales and marketing director and managing director at African Brick Pty Ltd. He held various executive directorship positions in manufacturing and retailing companies. He is past president of the Clay Brick Association of Southern Africa, past president of Master Builders Association North. He also served on the boards of St. Anthony's Education Trust between 2000 and 2013, African Brick Pty Ltd between 2009 to 2013, Central Brick Hardware from 2009 to 2013, Coral Brick 2013 to date, Kopano Brick Works 2014 to 2019, Matusi Investment 2019 to date, Corporate SMME Development Forum 2005 to 2009, Chairman of Umesajwa Investment Pty Ltd 2012 to date, Chairman of Sharanko Energy 2021 to date, John Martin Catholic School Board of Trustees 2021 to date. As a chairman, Musa matriculated in 1976. He holds a National Diploma in Marketing Management from IMM, National Diploma in Human Resource Management from IPM, Management Development Program MDP from Wits Business School, Level 3 Concrete Technology, CNCI. Let us put our hands together for the President of Master Builders, South Africa, Mr. Musa Shangas. Let's welcome him. Thank you. Just now, I think I'm still speaking to people that you are falling asleep. All right. Without further ado, let me hand over to the captain of this particular session, Tate Mofuke.
Yes, ma'am.
I know they won't sleep under your watch.
Oh, no.
Never. Yeah.
The one who sleeps, we expel you from the room. I do have bouncers outside specifically mandated to carry out those who are sleeping. You can't sleep after we fed you. It's illegal. Right, colleagues, a very good afternoon to you, and let me also extend a warm welcome to my heavyweight panel. I'm sure you've heard their CVs. I thought I was going to make some notes, but as the program director was going on and on, I thought, no. Let me not waste my time taking notes of what they have done and achieved thus far in their careers. So once again, let's give them a warm round of applause. Let me also just send my greetings and gratitude to the board of JBCC under the leadership of my comrade, Mr. Kumasen Thamburan, as well as the CEO, Mr. Rakesh Singh. Thank you very much to the board and to the CEO and to the management of the JBCC for putting this together. It is always wonderful for us to come together as the industry to come and exchange ideas and to understand where we are going, latest trends, and see how do we position ourselves so that we can be able to run our businesses much more sustainably. And I am quite excited to be chairing this panel of heavyweights so that we can give them an opportunity to come and address us and tell us what is happening in their different areas of operation. I was quite excited when I saw the themes that they will be addressing. I never thought that in my life I will listen to a senior counsel telling me about funding of contractors. But today it's going to happen. So the senior counsel is going to tell us, in terms of funding, what is happening out there, because what we are seeing, especially those industry associations that are taking care of contractors, is that from a funding perspective in particular, the performance guarantees, the PIs and so on, the market is becoming more and more tight, tougher, and it's very, very, very discouraging to see the trends, because it also means that those that are emerging and coming into the industry are not being supported, but established players seems to be enjoying further and further support. So if you look at what's happening, especially in the construction performance guarantee space, it's very, very interesting. So I look forward to hearing more from this, from the advocate, so that we can look at also what options are there for us. I often refer to that sector as the financial services sector that services the construction industry. And so they are regulated differently from us, but the impact that they have on the industry is quite significant. And so I look forward to hearing more from the advocate in terms of what are the trends and what do we need to do as the industry to reposition ourselves so that we can align with what is happening on that side, so that we can continue to enjoy the support that we get from the providers of these financial products that make it possible for us to operate a sustainable industry. So, colleagues, let me then afford the advocate 10 minutes to address us in terms of what are the trends and issues regarding funding as far as construction guarantees and projects are concerned. Advocate, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Just adjust the lateral and horizontal elevation. Mr. Tamburan, Mr. Kole, Mr. Singh, everyone associated with the JBCC, a happy birthday. I'm honored to speak to such a learned audience, and Mr. Moderator, you won't believe this, but advocates do know about funding. Send me a brief and I'll send you an invoice.
And we will sue the funders.
And we'll sue the funder. Ladies and gentlemen, the relationship between the JBCC and this fine institution, almost 50 years old now, has been a long and a close relationship. We've been training and appointing arbitrators, adjudicators and mediators for various industries, but in particular for the construction industry. So from that perspective, we as the Association of Arbitrators are honored to be associated with the JBCC, and we're happy to be here. Mark Twain said, if you need a 2-hour speech, I'm ready now. If you need a 15-minute speech, I'll need 2 weeks. So fortunately, JBCC gave me 2 weeks, but what they did now was to shift the goalpost. They made it 10 minutes. So let me get started without further ado. And I will skip the first part of what I had to say to you, just because the moderator was unfair to me. So if you want to know what I was going to say to you in the first 2 minutes, send me a brief and I'll send you an invoice. This paper is available from the JBCC. I learned that our general manager, Rochelle Appleton, sent it to the JBCC, so I'm also not going to bore you with the finer detail of case law that I will be referring to. If you want to know more about it, the JBCC will provide you with a full document. So let's get started. What is, or let me place it in perspective, the JBCC also changed the goalpost. My instruction was to talk to you about construction guarantees, not funding in the construction industry. So what I have to say to you is focused only on demand guarantees. So what is a demand guarantee and where does it fit in to this whole process? From a legal perspective, it is a contract in which a guarantor, normally a commercial bank or insurance company, promises to pay a specific sum of money to a beneficiary. And those terms are important, we'll get back to them. To pay a specific sum of money to a beneficiary, normally the employer, upon receiving a demand in which a specific event is alleged, for example, non-compliance with the contract. This event, the event that has to be alleged, for example, cancellation of a contract, need not be proved by the beneficiary, but often the guarantee instrument requires the submission of a specified document, for example, a cancellation notice. Upon receipt of a demand that complies with the terms of the guarantor is obliged to honor the guarantee. Disputes relating to performance in the underlying contract, and that's the construction contract, are irrelevant. Therefore, the beneficiary can rest, maybe I should qualify that, relatively assured that it will receive payment from the guarantor in terms of the on-demand guarantee. Disputes relating to the entitlement of the beneficiary must be dealt with separately between the beneficiary and his counterpart in the underlying contract. In other words, between the employer and the contractor. And that is why an on-demand guarantee is sometimes referred to as an unconditional guarantee, as opposed to a necessary guarantee. I'm going to skip another part because most of you know exactly how these on-demand guarantees work. What I want to get to is what I've referred to as the disputes between the parties in the underlying contract. Those disputes are independent of the guarantee, and that relies on what in legal terms we refer to as the independence principle. The beneficiary, in terms of an on-demand guarantee, seeks to achieve a specific objective, and that is maximum security, certainty that it will be paid by the guarantor, as long as the beneficiary complies with the terms of the guarantee. And those requirements are normally very simple. It's either the allegation of a certain event or the production of a document. The last thing that the beneficiary wants is to have his demand frustrated or delayed by, for example, a performance dispute arising from the underlying contract. Now, to achieve this objective, the independence principle is of vital importance. It detaches the payment obligation under the guarantee from performance in terms of the underlying contract. It renders the guarantee independent from the underlying contract. And we will revert to the independence principle, but for now we can put it aside. If you're interested from a legal perspective and a practical perspective to know more about the independence principle, I invite you to read the judgment of the Supreme Court of Appeal in First Rand Bank versus Brera. The footnote in this document will refer you to the case reference. Now, I've said that the independence principle detaches the payment obligation from performance in terms of the underlying contract. The question is this: is the detachment absolute? And the answer is no. The independence principle is not absolute. Because lawyers love exceptions, there is an exception to this principle. And that is what we refer to as the fraud exception. It is the only true exception to the independence principle. And it works like this. Since the 1940s, courts in common law jurisdictions around the world have disregarded the independence principle where there was clear evidence of fraud. And this approach had its origin in the New York County Supreme Court in the case of Steyn. Again, the footnote is in the notes. In this context, we have to make a clear distinction between active intentional fraud on the one hand and the usual underlying disputes relating to, for example, breach of contract on the other hand. The precise basis of the fraud exception and the definition of fraud, who has to perpetrate it, whether the fraud must originate from the guarantee or from the underlying contract, and a number of other conceptual issues are still in the process of developing in South African law. All that we have time for, and that is because the moderator cut down 5 minutes of my time, is for me to illustrate to you that there are different notions of fraud and that the fraud exception did not have its origin in the law relating to on-demand guarantees. It had its origin in the law relating to letters of credit. On-demand guarantees and letters of credit have certain characteristics in common, but they are also very different, and we'll get back to this. English law initially recognized only fraud in the narrow sense. This means that English law required that the fraud had to relate to the documentation presented by the beneficiary to the guarantor. In other words, to put it in practical terms, if it was clear that one of the documents that the beneficiary had to submit to the guarantor had a fraudulent signature on it, then that was a clear case of fraud in the narrow sense. Over time, English law developed, and it developed to a point where fraud in the wider sense was also recognized as a valid exception to the independence principle. Fraud in the wider sense includes situations where the fraud relates to the underlying contract or conduct within the underlying contract. Now we can see now the scope is broadening. As the scope of fraud is broadening, the independence principle is encroached upon little by little. So English law developed even further. As it stands, it now also recognizes fraud as an exception to the independence principle in situations where the beneficiary could not honestly have believed that it had a basis for demanding payment under the guarantee. There are certain English case law which I've stipulated in the notes, and you are welcome to read them. The footnotes are there and they are available on the internet. So let's look at what the situation in South African law is. Where do we stand on this issue and what is regarded as fraud as an exception to the independence principle. 1996, our appellate division pronounced in Loomcraft that our courts will prevent a guarantor from paying a beneficiary if established that the beneficiary was party to a fraud in relation to the documents. In other words, that was a recognition of what the English legal development was at its first stages. That's still a far cry away from fraud in the broader sense or wider sense, and from an absence in the honest belief of an entitlement to payment. Later in 1996, the Johannesburg High Court in Union Carriage expressed, I think the best way to describe it would be a cautious support for the wider fraud exception in South Africa. In other words, it appeared as if fraud in the underlying contract was gaining support as an exception to the independence principle. And by 2014, we had a clear indication that our courts accept fraud in the form of a lack of honest belief as an exception to the independence principle. And again, case law, 1 minute. I'm almost done. All right, so I have included in my notes the case law that will take you to our current position, where it is clear that our courts accept fraud in the narrow sense, in the wider sense, and even a wider sense, namely that the beneficiary should have an honest belief that he is entitled to payment. And because the moderator is being extremely unfair to me, I'll jump right to the conclusion. My question to you is, and I'm not going to provide you with an answer unless I receive a brief and I can send an invoice for that. Is it in our interest, the construction industry, to have this widening of the concept of fraud? Or is it in our interest to have it as narrow as possible, in other words, equal to a as certain as possible on-demand guarantee? That's all I have to you.
Another round of applause to the advocate for Construction Law 101. Advocate, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest fraud against contractors is this on-demand guarantee. That is the greatest fraud against us as contractors. So we must address that thing, because it gets abused by clients. Clients are abusing it, and so we want your legal mind, advocate, to advise us as to how must we change these contracts so that the situation is fair for all of us. And one of the briefs that we're going to give you, and this will be just the work that you do for the benefit of the wider industry, advocate, you will not bill for this, is that government is not paying us. Government clients are not paying us on time.
They're not paying me either.
Okay. So at least you are feeling the pain that we are feeling. So we need to collectively address this issue. One of the things that we want to present is that government must give us payment guarantees. I will leave the wedding to you, advocate. You will sort out the wedding. The CIDB is here. Both the chair and the CEO are here. So as they go and talk to the political principals, they must know what the industry says today. When we want payment guarantees, the advocate will sort out the wedding as to how it must be structured. But it's not fair that the biggest or the largest client is not paying us on time. And we are all suffering as a result of that. So if we give government performance guarantees, CEO, government must give us payment guarantees, because they're not keeping to their latter end of the contract. So that's what we need to do as CEO. We are not going to rest, CEO, until we get our payment guarantees from government. Chairperson, we are not resting. We want our payment guarantees. We are not going to close our businesses because government is not paying us. We can't have that. We cannot. Colleagues, we are getting to the next speaker, the chair of the CIDB. He's going to be addressing a very important issue for the industry, which is that of the development of our emerging contractors, and obviously delving into the grading system and obviously the utilization of existing contracts as to how we can achieve that. Over to you, the chair. Thank you very much. A warm round of applause.
Thank you, Program Director. I think there's some fraud that has happened here, because the last time I checked, my speech was meant to be 20 minutes, and then when I was practicing at home, it came up to 40 minutes. I've been trying to cut it down to 30 minutes, and then the CEO added a few lines, and it went back to 40. So there's been a lot of fraudulent activity behind the scenes. Nevertheless, I'd like to welcome you all to the board of the JBCC, to the CEO and the members of the board and the delegates and members here. I'm here as the chairperson of the CIDB. My name is Lenzo. I'm accompanied by my CEO there, at the front there, the young man who was recently appointed in June. Don't be misled by his size. He's only 32 years old. So you are welcome to confront him on any issue that bothers you. He's simply a young man, but I think in stature and size he's trying to take after me. Ladies and gentlemen, let me express my warm greetings to you all who are in attendance in this prestigious 25th anniversary of the JBCC. It also reminds me, Program Director, that the CIDB is also 20 years, established in 2002. So I think at some point we'll expect some congratulations as well. I'm indeed honored to have been invited to this August occasion to address you on the very important issue of contractor development in the construction industry, which is strategic to our economy above all. I'm grateful for the networking opportunity which a platform like this provides to captains of industry and experts to share knowledge and best practices. I think I won't bore you with the overall background of the construction industry. I think we're quite aware in terms of where we are following COVID and the challenges that the industry faces. Post-pandemic, I think there's been a struggle, and obviously the activity has been reduced drastically. However, from the CIDB, our analysis that we have made is that on top of that, government is just not spending on infrastructure. I think the CEO maybe at some point will be able to share with you that expenditure is low in certain departments, municipalities. It is as low as 37% of what has been budgeted for the infrastructure and construction industry, which is very worrying, meaning that the industry is not performing to its level that it should be. These are the worrisome issues that we need to not only hide behind COVID, but also realize that there's a capacity issue in government in terms of spending. I hope I'm not quoted on these things in political forums, but that is the reality and that is the truth that I need to raise. Contractor development, I'm really trying to streamline my 40 minutes to 10. Contractor development, like in any other industry, there are many role players in the industry that ensure successful completion of projects, such as financiers, architects, designers, engineers, contractors, and of course lawyers, and subcontractors and regulators. Out of all these role players, contractors are the ones who are supposed to deliver the real physical infrastructure on time, within budget, and with zero compromise on the quality and safety. Therefore, contractors can either make or destroy any construction project. If they are not properly skilled or resourced, resulting in huge financial losses for clients. Moreover, poorly executed projects can compromise the safety of users. Hence, we cannot afford to ignore the issue of contractor development and how it ultimately plays a pivotal role in a successful completion of projects. There are many best practices for contractor development, and and what I consider to be the key elements of a successful contractor development program. I think we often also make the mistake that when we talk development, we think we need to introduce people to the industry. We need to think about grade one, and that is it. And what we're actually doing is that we are removing people to be vegetable vendors straight into the industry, from the taxi industry into this one. And this is a problem. And we keep on then developing people who are really not real contractors, who are passively job seekers, and I think it's been a problem for a while. I think I'll share, as the CIDB, how we try to address that problem. And contractor development must not only be for those low grades, it must also look at the developing of our construction companies to be competitive globally. And this suggests that development programs should also look at the higher grades, your grade 6, 5, 7, 8, 9, to make sure that we are developing the industry for our contractors to be competitive globally. And I think it's something that I wanted to raise. Yes, we fully understand the initiatives, and we are not shy to say that the construction industry must also develop our blacks, previously disadvantaged, youth, women, and children. But on top of that, we also need to look forward and ensure that we have a developed industry that's on the cutting edge of technology. I'd like to also share something which is important, which also talks to the construction, to the development of our contractors. I'm not sure if many of you are aware that the CIDB has what is called a BUILD program. It's B-U-I-L-D, meaning it stands for Best Practice, Unity, Innovation, Leadership, and Development. And as I go around, I get to understand that many of our stakeholders are not aware of the BUILD program. And what the BUILD program is simply, similarly to NHBRC, on any and every project, be it private and public sector, above 20 million, a BUILD fee is levied. The BUILD fee is 0.2%, which will be paid to the CIDB. And the purpose of that fee is for us to use that fund and use those funds on development initiatives. One, we need to capacitate the CIDB to play its regulatory role, and part of that fund is to ensure that we capacitate our contractors in terms of development. This would be through development finance, construction guarantees that fund will be issuing out to the contractors. And I think most people tend to think that because CIDB is regulating for now the public sector, that this is applicable to the public sector. From the 1st of April 2021, last year, the BUILD program is actually in effect. Private or public project needs to be registered with the CIDB to the value of above 20 million. Those projects should be registered with the CIDB and a 0.2% fee paid to the CIDB. It is law. It is not my wish. It is law. And I think the advocate will tell you what law means. It means that if you do not comply, there are consequences. And please, ladies and gentlemen, let us not plead ignorance, because I have told you. I've mentioned how the BUILD program will work in terms of the fee itself and its distribution, in terms of contractor development, skills development, and also the financing part of it, which also will form where the CIDB will actually issue the guarantees and training, etc. Looking at all the initiatives that will develop the industry and make sure that not only do we transform, but we also develop the industry. We believe that this intervention will ultimately lead to an increase in the number of competent construction companies and workers with nationally accredited qualifications and registrations, with their respective professional councils and industry associations. It will also promote mentoring and coaching of new entrants in the industry as a business norm, especially for small contractors. I understand that CBE is here. Ladies and gentlemen, how we are thinking now as CIDB is to kind of think forward. As a regulator, we need to be able to regulate the entire industry. Hence, the private sector is also going to form part of the industry. When I mean private sector, I mean the private contractors that are working on private jobs, will need to register with the CIDB, and that is the direction that we are taking. We can't be a regulator that simply regulates one sector of the construction economy. These are the amendments and changes that are coming up. The reason for this is that we need to link the projects, we need to link the professionals, we need to link the work that is happening, and manufacturers and suppliers. We need to be able to tell a story of what is actually happening in our industry. It's useless for us to regulate one aspect of the industry and not all of it. And that is the direction which the CIDB is going. And there are many amendments that we are proposing, one being regulatory amendments, and also being amendments in terms of the Act itself of the CIDB. And I think, considering that this will also take a public participation process, let me give you some heads up in terms of the thinking that is included in the amendment of these regulations and the Act itself. First of all, tender limit participation of external foreign companies. I think we're taking an attitude where we believe that the construction industry and its economy belongs to South Africans. Foreign companies will only be limited to trade in grade 9 only, and that is the proposal that we are proposing. And of course, we have consulted with the Competition Commission, who seem to be excited about the idea. Downrating. Downrating is when contractors at a certain level tender with contractors in lower levels. We intend to limit this activity to ensure that there's upliftment of the smaller contractors. In other words, if you are a grade 9, you can't then tender with a grade 7. You'll only be allowed to tender one grade down. And that is the direction that we are taking. Private contractor registration, I've mentioned that, and people tend to confuse it with the private projects registrations. The registration of the projects pertains to the projects, which is current law now, that all projects over 20 million need to be registered, and I've described that. Private sector contractor registration means that contractors who want to do work anywhere in SA will have to register with the CIDB and have a grading. And the idea is to unify the industry and also ensure uniformity. We can't have a contractor that's good enough to do private work but can't do government work. We can't have a contractor doing public work and can't do private work. So we need to have one standard. And in both worlds, private and public, as the CIDB, we want to get the advantage of the best industry possible that we can bring out. We're also looking at grade 1 entry requirements. And the sad thing, and mostly our stakeholders crush us on this, but we need to professionalize this industry. Like I've mentioned, the time of selling vegetables and waking up tomorrow and seeing an opportunity in construction is over. Grade 1 contractors will have to undertake some form of competency. And in consideration, it will be education and experience in terms of registration in our database. Let me try and rush. And those are the major items. And I know, Chair, that the previous speaker mentioned, or you mentioned, issues of payments and payment guarantees. Currently, we are embarking on a feasibility study, which we have been tasked by the Department of Public Works to undertake, which is looking at the ombudsman for the construction industry, mainly to look at issues of payment, late payment. We know that it is expensive for contractors to chase their payments and all the legal route, and all the money goes to the advocates, and the contractor is still left without the payment. So we are looking at an option of creating an ombuds route, which is probably far cheaper, possibly free if possible, where contractors can then complain about late payments and have the intervention of an ombuds. I keep on saying ombudsman, and I was being corrected that it's an ombuds. It could be male or female. So the role of the ombuds would really look at the delayed payments and also tender awards. Incorrect tender awards are a problem and are very costly for contractors. And we're hoping that some intervention from the ombuds would help us resolve these issues. In conclusion, Program Director, I think you said I have got 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us all today to reflect on whether all these initiatives are helping us to achieve our industry objectives and desired incomes. As role players in this industry, we are all committed to working together as a unit to address these challenges. More importantly, all these initiatives delivering tangible results that we all desire to achieve. For example, our contractor development programs effectively targeting the development of our contractors. Our contractor development programs improving the grading standard of contractors in targeting categories and grades. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, we can do better. We can do better, man. We can do better. Yeah, you see now, this is the chair of a board that is moving. We are moving. We've been discussing these matters for years. Now that the new board is in, they are hiring a young CEO, competent. We are moving. All the proposals to get things done, bringing the private sector, we are moving. We are making progress. This is exciting from the CIDB. And thank you very much, Chair. You know, and if we juxtapose this with the new ESCOM board that we expect to move, because we have a crisis. You know, the chairperson is telling us, no, the heart of the CEO is in the right place. We said, no. I don't think we appointed the chair and the board to go and locate the geographical location of the heart of the CEO. We want the board to move and get things done. So here we're not talking hearts here. We're talking movement on issues that are affecting the industry. So thank you very much, Chair, for that refreshing update. We are moving, colleagues. We are moving at the CIDB. Let me also recognize and welcome my president, Mr. Denny Masemini of the Black Business Council in the Built Environment. President, welcome. Thank you very much, President. Colleagues, we are moving. As we all know that as business, labor, government, and community at Network, we did agree on something called the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. And part of that was to try and see how do we get the economy going after the pandemic. But we also have a crisis of, the supply of energy in the industry and the economy generally, as we said now, talking to ESCOM issues. And the next speaker will be talking about some of the opportunities that do exist for us as market players, in the crisis that we have as far as ESCOM is concerned. So she has done a lot of work in this space, and let's put our hands together to welcome Mayor Jose to come and tell us about some of the opportunities she's seeing as far as the energy crisis is concerned. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, colleagues. Good afternoon. My name is Jose Moleshe, as it was said. I hope this is not too much. Basically, I will start with addressing you with respect to the electricity supply industry, as well as the opportunities that are available in that industry. Just as an overview, for those who are not very familiar with the industry, a quick overview. Energy, obviously, is not just electricity. It is also oil and gas. But today, I thought that let me focus on the electricity supply industry, given the challenges. So we all know we have challenges related to load shedding, and the structure of the industry in terms of the value chains is that we have a generation sector where ESCOM is dominant, and ESCOM is owns about 95%, supplies about 95% of electricity in that sector. And we have a few municipalities that also generate power, as well as independent power producers. These are both regional independent power producers, as well as renewable energy independent power producers. And then we have the transmission industry, which really is the transmission of energy from power generation plants to customers. And then we have the distribution industry. The transmission industry, 100% owned by ESCOM, and there is third-party access. There are willing arrangements. Willing arrangements, however, at this point, are going through a review because there's generally right now, people who supply power, IPPs who supply power to customers have a bilateral discussion with Eskom. So that is going through a review since the industry itself is being restructured completely. Then we have the distribution industry, which is really the municipalities as well as Eskom that generate that sector. In terms of the generation industry, that is where most of the challenges as well as the opportunities are available. In terms of the challenges, everyone knows that we have an issue with infrastructure and supply of electricity, with power plants that are not performing in line with where they're supposed to be. As Eskom is the dominant player, we have issues with respect to the debt that Eskom owes of over 450 billion. We have issues with respect to almost, Eskom is almost bankrupt, if you can put it that way, because they rely on National Treasury for support, even to pay employees. So we have an industry that is supposed to be an anchor to the economy, but the challenges are vast, and that creates opportunities for new players. So in terms of the regulatory framework, recently government actually changed the requirements for licensing. Initially it was to say generation units that are over 100 megawatts will not have to apply for licenses, but it's generally open now. So you find that the big industries and coal mining industries are getting into the space in a big way. You find RFPs from Sasol, you find RFPs from general players in the sector looking to do this project. And therefore, in terms of the construction industry, that is an industry that's opening up. You also have an established procurement program, which is called the Renewable Energy Independent Power Procurement Program. And that program is backed by a government guarantee through National Treasury. And there is a standardized power purchase agreement, which is used. There are opportunities in both the solar industry as well as the wind industry. The challenge, however, is that you find a lot of players that are international. You mentioned local players and opportunities. You find that there's a lot of international players because they both have, in terms of the requirements for a funding perspective, they require a large balance sheet often, and also tier one contractors. For instance, in the wind industry, your Vestas and all of these top 10 players in this market tend to be international because they've got international experience. What we've seen, at least in my previous life as a financier, is that in some cases there's collaboration between these parties to at least try to minimize that. There's also opportunities with respect to the whole value chain. Contractors, because of the constraints in the market right now, there's a huge demand. For instance, the renewable energy IPP program is almost doubling in terms of requirements, but there's constraints in the market in terms of the whole supply chain. If you look at the wind industry, for instance, some of the logistics of taking wind turbines from the ports to where they are supposed to be, some of the vehicles that are requirement are not sufficient in South Africa to be able to do this logistical work. And that is an area that most players don't look at. They tend to look at your balance of plant, which is really construction inside the solar PV projects or within the wind farms. But there's a lot of opportunities within that value chain with respect to logistics and construction that many players are not looking at. Then there's a huge constraint that will be created by so much generation procurement that will take place with respect to transmission infrastructure, distribution infrastructure. Already in the Northern Cape is the area in South Africa with the greatest solar resources. But you find that the projects are moving to the Free State, are moving to other areas where there's relatively less solar resources, but still sufficient resources. That is because that there's constraints within the transmission infrastructure. And therefore, Eskom will have to do a lot of work of constructing the transmission, as well as municipalities, distribution infrastructure to be able to support this power that will be generated to be able to go where it's supposed to be. Most of the municipalities are working on their wheeling frameworks. They are working on the wheeling tariffs to be able to make sure that that industry opens up. So those are some of the opportunities that you find. From a financing point of view, as I said earlier on, the constraints, especially for the smaller players, tend to be the issues that relate to balance sheet issues that relate to experience and that kind of thing. In terms of the transmission infrastructure, there's sorry, I lost my trail of thought. Yeah, in terms of the transmission infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier on, there's the gap that is created by the requirements that will be in the market. Yeah. The last part, how much time do I have? Okay, I'm still okay. Yeah. The last part in the distribution market, I think that some of the examples that I can think of are, for instance, Vodacom. Vodacom having announced in the market that they are looking for support in terms of not necessarily depending too much on municipalities in terms of the distribution industry. They are looking for independent power producers to support them to supply solar PV systems, for instance, for their towers. And that is an area that is totally opening up and totally new in the industry. So those are some of the areas where I think that the construction industry could look at. Yeah. Thank you.
We can do better, colleagues. We can do better. Thank you very much, Mekuse, for that. And I hope that we are connecting the dots here. By the way, Mekuse, as I was looking at the messages coming in now, the medium-term expenditure framework that has just been delivered by the Minister of Finance, government is going to be taking over up to 2/3 of the 400 billion rand debt of Eskom. So that is another opportunity that we must look at, because then once you clean Eskom's debt, a lot of things are now going to follow, after that. And so when we talk to the CIDB, the chair is saying, no, we are going to ring-fence certain opportunities for South African companies. So we must make sure that the projects that are going to come out of Eskom, those projects are set aside only for South African companies. This is what we need to do, colleagues. So we must all work collaboratively to create an environment that is conducive for our players here, not only to be sustainable, but to also thrive under the current market conditions. All right. The next speaker is going to be Mr. Chris Campbell, the CEO of the Consulting Engineers South Africa. He's going to be talking to the issue of total cost of ownership of our infrastructure. As we roll out infrastructure, the gaps that we are seeing is that a lot of public sector clients are focusing a lot on new infrastructure and ignoring maintaining existing infrastructure. And so we need then to have a new approach as far as infrastructure investment is concerned. And I know that Mr. Campbell, as business, we are meeting in Network on Monday to go and talk about the Eskom issues. The chair of Eskom is going to be there. This is one of the issues that we need to table with the firing of the CEO. Thank you very much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Should we call you program director, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues, JBCC colleagues, industry colleagues. Allow me firstly to say, I heard there was a happy birthday here for JBCC. It's rather a young fledgling organization, but well done. I cannot help but share with you that CESA, Consulting Engineer South Africa, which is the organization of which I am currently the CEO, turned 70 this year, in August, in fact. And Tate Khole has just left. I wanted to share with him that we've reinvented ourselves over many years post-1994. So, any references to a pre-94 era need to be put and become a distant memory. And, of course, we continue to reinvent ourselves so that we stay abreast of the changing world of infrastructure development and delivery. But that's not my topic for today. Mine is to try and help sexify the fact that we need to look after what we build. I think we all get all excited with all the new stuff, but we leave a lot of project opportunities on the table because there certainly isn't sufficient capacity for the owners of these assets to do the maintenance and make sure that, and as a country, we can't keep buying new stuff. So, simply put, I'm going to try and get through, and I don't want him to stick a knife in my back here, so I'm going to be rather quick. I've tried to. These slides will be available. I'm not going to read those things to you line by line. I'm aware of the death by PowerPoint. But it's good to have structure. And I have a lot of illustrations, which are almost self-evident. So I'm going to cover what exactly, why there's a need for this differentiation in the thinking. You don't think of the total cost of infrastructure when you go and buy ballpoint pens at the shop. You use it once, so you can throw it away. If it stops working, you're in the bin. And then, I'm going to take you through the whole process. So infrastructure, preaching to the converted, many of you, yeah? It's not a off-the-shelf consumable. It's a 20 to 30 year, if not more, decision that you're making. You're not just appointing a consultant and then that's the end of the job, or you're appointing a contractor. As a owner, as a developer, whether you're private sector, public sector, you own that for a very long time. And what we found is that there's a counterintuitive approach that's being adopted, which has got a long-term consequence. And we want to try and change that narrative. And that's what this total cost of ownership, the life cycle costs of infrastructure. In fact, I've got a slide later on where government through Infrastructure South Africa, in the analysis of the projects that are meant to come on stream, have actually gone through a program called the 5-case model, derived from the UK. It's no different to what we normally would do. Concept, pre-feasibility, feasibility, and then, prelim, design, detailed, construction, O&M. And we seem to, too often, jump from a concept, that's a nice to have, and then we go and build it. If you look at the number of empty BRTs, the unfinished bus stations, I think, there's a long list of these because they haven't been through that process. So, I think, let me start off by sharing with you the simplest analogy on what we mean by total cost of ownership. Many of you have probably gone off and bought a printer. Printers are very cheap these days. But unless you actually go and find out from them, so how much do the cartridges cost? How many prints can I get? You may actually find that the cheapest printer is going to cost you the most money to own because of the replacement cost of the cartridges and the utility you get out of them. So that's a simple analogy. In our infrastructure world, we start with the consulting services, built environment professionals, design, put the whole lot together, and then you go into construction, and then you hand over the project, and it's the client or the owner of the asset that then has to sit with whatever it is they're supposed to have and own and operate. Now, realistically, you're talking about the design and the upfront stages constituting, and these are from an international source, so I haven't made these figures up myself, about 3% of the total cost of ownership over the asset life of the 30 years. And that's 5 years in your consulting and design process. Then you go into construction, another 30% of the cost, another 5 years, provided, of course, the contract is completed on time and within budget. But then, here's the kicker. The operations and maintenance, 67% of the total cost, and 30 years, in some instances 40 years. So an unsuspecting client might end up with a real problem if the starting point could arguably have been flawed. And we need to take a few steps back and reverse this counterintuitive approach. It's probably much better to invest more upfront by ensuring that you don't force consultants, whether they're architects, engineers, quantity surveyors, to discount on their professional fees, because you'd never do that for a medical practitioner anyway. What is he going to ask you? Must I leave part of your body parts out or something? So, I mean, the same is true here. But you're happy to accept that there are these latent defects that you're going to pick up long after handover and long after the guarantee periods. So, what is it that we need to look at in our process is different mindset around life cycle planning. At the moment, too much of our infrastructure tends to be run to failure. And of course, when you run something to failure, it means you've got to replace it. It's a whole lot cheaper to actually repair it periodically, much like you would your motor car. You buy a brand new car, you don't just drive it blindly until it, runs aground. So infrastructure is no different to that. And I think in the whole planning process, much as we'd like to do everything, one needs to also look at what project should be pursued where you can maximize the benefits and get it at the appropriate costs, not least costs. Because least cost, I think the Afrikaans expression is quite evident. Goedkoop is duurkoop. And you could pay a lot more in the long run for something that you think you've paid a lot less for in the beginning. I once shared an analogy with one of my colleagues from Public Works when he argued that the pricing of, or the relative pricing and the services of professionals is out of kilter. And I said to him, so, but is the problem not that you are accepting too low a cost for those services, but you're expecting Rolls-Royce delivery out of that? There's a fault on both sides. Firstly, professionals should never have opened that Pandora's box. Built environment professionals, I don't know how we're going to close it. But secondly, as a client, you ought to know that when you walk into a Mercedes-Benz showroom and you want to buy a C-Class top range, and the price is about the cost of a VW Beetle, you should walk away. You shouldn't imagine you're getting a bargain with that quality. It's completely counterintuitive. And the same is true in our infrastructure. Thank you. So the next phase, construction, are important here because we've seen there's been aspersions cast. There are corrupt people all over the show. But in the process of developing our infrastructure, there needs to be an understanding that unless there is an agreement, a contractual agreement that binds consultant and contractor to jointly deliver, there's a separation between the two. And the consultant
is the owner's engineer, representing the owner's engineer. The aspersions that we've seen some of our road entities, boards make against that are completely destructive to the process. And I think in the construction phase, what's important in the life cycle is there are no room for shortcuts, and we cannot be burying our mistakes when they come to our construction processes. I mean, that's why it takes the smallest of rainstorms to flood a road. Nice little illustration there. I'm not going to dwell on that, but it's all of the above or one of the above. All of them lead to those, the consequences. If you are remiss in any of those stages, either one or all of them, you might end up with those catastrophic situations. So what is the end result then that you as a client and owner of these assets need to be aware of? Firstly, poor professional advice will give you poor equipment specifications and equipment that breaks down more frequently. Your material choices will give you substandard functionality. And then instead of you being able to do your maintenance, unplanned maintenance on a 70%, on a 30% of the time unplanned emergency, as is the case with Eskom, I guess, right now. 30%, now you're doing unplanned maintenance 70% of the time. So you're reversing that cycle. And then when we look at your available resources to do the planned and preventive maintenance, and that's what caused the problem, you're not spending enough time proactively to try and mitigate the risk of the unplanned breakdowns and shutdowns of a power plant and other forms of equipment. I think we're going to see water becoming the next area of that. So very quickly, my learned program director, nice technical illustration. Anybody in the maintenance environment will appreciate that. It starts at the top there. The laser's not strong enough. And you'll see it deteriorates. And it's like a sawtooth. If you don't catch it in time and bring it back up, it'll go down, and progressively it ends up right at the bottom there, where you're going to get failure. This is exactly the model that applies to most, and just about everything that needs to be maintained. This is an example relating to pavements. Potholes are not accidents. They're a result of exactly that neglect. Finally, it's important, therefore, for us to look at in your life cycle planning is optimal operating cost balance, because it is great. You want a Rolls Royce, but can you afford it for the whole period and the process? Of course, you need to balance the equations between cost and reliability. And there's a nice graph there that shows you what would be the reliability versus maintenance costs, etc., so that at least you know you are not over-investing either. So there's a balance so that you're not taken for a ride and you find that it's costing you too much when it need not have. Finally, I'd like to believe that all asset owners have to start thinking along the lines of total cost of ownership, in infrastructure particularly. And if you start with the best consulting engineering advice, not the cheapest ones, that's a good start. And then your investment must be coupled with that aftercare. Because without that, you're actually throwing money away. And the problem we have as a country, we're good at managing capital, but we lose sight of the operating costs that municipalities have to pay. And then they end up not having enough money to employ plumbers to fix the water leaks when we're losing 40% of our revenue water down the streets. So, you know, we've got to reverse that thinking. And it's always better to invest in frequent low-cost maintenance rather than allowing our infrastructure to run to failure. With that, I'd like to thank you. I've flown through this, I hope that at least I've planted just those four, total cost of ownership as a mantra. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Another warm round of applause for Chris for that very informative presentation. Thank you very much, Chris. And I think that's the direction we should all be taking. When we are planning to invest in infrastructure, it does not stop with new build. We have to take the maintenance aspect of it into consideration. One of the poorly planned projects in the province was the e-tolls. Very poorly planned. I'm glad that today, finally, it has been transferred to national and provincial structures, that debt. So I look forward to not receiving the bill. Through. It's fine. At least we'll pay it with the rest of the country, as opposed to only us, the people of Gauteng. So I'm glad about that. Colleagues, in the interest of time, let me now call on the president, the brand new president from the box for the Master Builders South Africa, Mr. Shangas, to come and just share with us his thoughts around challenges for SMME development in the built environment. The brand new president. A warm round of applause.
Leadership of the JBCC, Chair, Deputy Chair, CEO, members of the board, fellow master builders who are present this afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Musa Shangase. As Gregory just said, I'm brand new as the president of Master Builders. I'm also director of Corobrick, so I'm wearing two hats, but for the purpose of today's presentation, I'll be wearing the head of the Master Builders Association South Africa. I hope I'm not going to contradict CIDB's program on SMEs. If I do, Mr. Nzo, please don't take it personal. I have been asked to speak on the challenges facing the SMEs in the built environment. Let me first, on behalf of MBSA, congratulate JBCC on its silver jubilee anniversary. May the coming years bring more fortune and prosperity. May you grow from strength to strength. As the president of MBA, I have to mention the state of the construction industry in South Africa briefly. I think I'll just take one paragraph just to define the state of the industry. The state of the construction industry in South Africa has been a rocky ground for a number of years, and it was hard by the early stages of pandemic. If one asked me to describe it, I would use the words of the great author Charles Dickens when he described the period of the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror in his novel entitled Tale of Two Cities. Sum it up for me. Dickens wrote, and I quote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was a season of light. It was a season of darkness. It was a spring of hope. It was a winter of despair." Close quote. And listening to Mr. Nzo, it makes so much sense. A similar exhalation between hope and despair characterize our recent past, and it must be said, our future as an industry. As the Minister Kubai has alluded to this morning, South African construction sector is a driver of socio-economic development and a key employment multiplier. Yet despite its strategic importance, declining infrastructure expenditure and mothballed public sector project has affected the sector. In 2019, the value added by the construction sector accounted for about 4% of GDP, and it employed well over 1.3 million people. notwithstanding the SMEs, otherwise known as emerging contractors in built environment, face some serious challenges in their endeavor to deliver the infrastructure project effectively. The reality for the construction industry in South Africa is that it is characterized by extensive subcontracting temporarily and insecure employment and poor working conditions. Just like the constitution of this country, in which it's been said it's one of the best constitutions in the country. In 1996, the South African government introduced noble programs to develop sustainable SMEs, though the sector is still suffering. The same year, the National Small Business Act was passed, which established the first National Small Business Council, which together set out the national strategy for the development of promotion of small businesses in South Africa. In 1998, the National Empowerment Fund was formed to provide financial and non-financial support to black-empowered businesses, thereby promoting investment in black-owned businesses. In 2003, the government issued an integrated small enterprise development strategy as a guideline for its support program and business development for the next 10 years. The overall aim of this targeted support was to improve economic growth, create jobs, and reduce poverty. However, according to Rogerson and the Department of Trade and Industry, SMEs still did not seem to reach their full growth potential. 28 years later, SMEs in the built environment are still facing challenges. And according to a research conducted by Department of Economics and Economics History and the Department of Public Administration at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, Program Director, for the sake of time, I have identified 5 challenges out of 30. Namely, SME ability to compete with big construction firms. On average, most of the emerging contractors are not strong enough to compete with the big construction firms. They mainly involve in construction work as subcontractors rather than main contractors, which keeps them as an emerging contractors for the rest of their existence. Lack of access to funding from commercial banks. The major problem experienced is due to various reasons, such as lack of collateral, lack of ability to repay the bank loans. High startup cost. Startup costs are high, considering that these emerging contractors start from nothing and they are not backed by any source of revenue and savings. Lack of professional advisor and consultant. Some of these emerging contractors are not even aware that this forum exists. Those who are aware, they can't afford it. Delayed payment, which has been said the whole morning, is a major problem facing almost all emerging contractors, regardless of education, experience, and/or period in business. The main culprit here are municipalities, and to some extent, government implementing agencies, and of course, main contractors. On the brighter side, in May 2020, Cabinet approved the establishment of Infrastructure in South Africa, ISA, a program with the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. These mandates are now housed under Infrastructure South Africa as a single point of entry for accelerating infrastructure investment, with particular focus on both public and private sector catalyst, social and economic infrastructure projects headed by Professor Khosi Ramakgopa, with the Minister Patricia de Lille overseeing the program as its executive authority. ISA reports to the President, Presidential Infrastructure Coordinated Commission Council, which is chaired by the President. Professor Ramakgopa advised us a few weeks ago that this program is a 10-year program with a budget of 2.2 trillion rand. And I hope that they've made provision for SMEs in that regard. And he made mention that SMEs will be taken care of. as I've said, I don't want to contradict your presentation, Mr. Nzo. Minister Kubai spoke of new urban agenda, and I hope SMEs are going to be taken care of. On the balance, I would say that while these grounds are optimistic, emerging contractors must be very cautious going forward. As I've said earlier, that our constitution looks very good, and some of the programs that our government put forward are noble. But our challenge as government, as private sector, as main contractors, as South Africans, is execution thereof. In conclusion, Program Director, emerging contractors have a perception that the construction industry as a whole is still white-dominated. They also believe that the Preferential Procurement Framework Act of 2000 and Preferential Procurement Regulation of 2017 has been hijacked by the so-called business forums. This was caused by government failing to communicate, execute, control the objectives of the Act. A large scale of emerging contractors' capacity can be collectively created through a strategic empowerment program, but it must be communicated properly. It must be benchmarked. It must be controlled, and it must be measured accordingly. I thank you.
Thank you very much, President, and thank you for your crisp presentation, which did not motivate me to come and tell you that we've got 2 minutes left of the presentation. So thank you very much for being presidential in that regard. Colleagues, we have an issue with time, so I'm just going to open the floor for just one round of questions so that we can give our panelists an opportunity to engage quickly, and then we will close the session because we need to prepare for the gala dinner. With a show of hands, I've got 3 questions. Okay, so we'll start with the gentleman over there, and the second question will be here, and the third question will be over here. And President Shangas, I've been having interesting conversations with my members around this whole issue of construction mafias and local business forums that have been hijacked by criminals and so on. And one of the thoughts that we need to come and lobby you on is, again, how do we then approach government on this issue? Some of the members are saying we should consider, a class action lawsuit because we are in trouble. There's lawlessness out there, and government is just not coming to the party. And so we need to, think about many ideas that we need to ponder over to resolve this issue. So let me, I was not attracting your response. I was just saying, President Shangas, expect my letter so that we can come and sit down. We need to lobby you on this one. Sir, over to you.
Thank you.
Your name first.
Yeah, so my name is Craig Bain. My question is directed to Mr. Nazor, the chairman of the CIDB. And what I wanted to ask was that, we got quite a detailed feedback from him on various processes about registering contractors that are operating in the private sector, foreign contractors, et cetera, but there had been earlier discussions within the CID about the registration of consultants, and there was no feedback on that. So I just wondered, is that plan sort of off the table now, or is that part of a different program? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Second one, yeah? The youth who are going to be brief, no preface. Straight to the question.
Yes, mine is not really a question, but an input for progress. So as we are youth who are fueled for the future, so we need to look at how we advance the notion. So on execution, on the looking at infrastructure, capacity building, and moving forward for a better South Africa, we need to lobby the chief and command of this nation to say that to build the capacity, we need to look at where civil work started and also to promulgate that notion of civil society being the master builders. So it requires everyone to be involved for continuous improvement so that we take care of the infrastructure to prevent the dilapidation and to also look at how we further assess the structural ingenuity or structural integrity of this nation. So that requires us to be key role players in advancing this notion. So to create that capacity and bridge the gap by lobbying the chief in command, we look at the three notions where technology is mostly advancing. We look at it at military, we look at it at health and finance. So in that, SMEs have a key role to play with the advancement where they can be placed for civil society service by being part and parcel of a structural integrity repairment process, which can be done at military level for civil society for 24 months or for 36 months process, where those tactics and strategies can be imparted, and then it will bridge the gap of unemployment, it will bridge the gap of SMEs, creating capacity and building the nation moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Third one?
Tony here from Ingelson Consult. My question is directed to CIDB per se. Can they please clarify the rumor that's going around about them scrapping the standard forms of contract and introducing sort of a standard contract for the public sector? Because there's been a rumor about that they're working on sort of a one contract approach for all the public contracts. And the second one is that all these issues around the SMMEs, there were proposals that adjudication should be law. And I think adjudication as a process of dispute resolution can assist in these issues with SMMEs to have them resolved quickly, because as everyone knows that adjudication is a pay now, argue later process. And how far with the CIDB with that there, because there were proposals that were put forward and things have been mummed to date. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So all the questions were directed at the CIDB. Chair, over to you. I don't know if you want to have maybe the CEO also coming in to respond. Okay, so if you are fine, it's fine. Let's give it to the chair. Chair, over to you.
Thank you. On the first question on the registration of consultants, yes, that is in progress. I think it's strange that most of the issues that I had to cut from my speech are the ones where questions are being raised. So you can blame that on the program director. Yes, the issue of the registration of consultants is going on. We've had consultations, public, trying to find a solution. We were then tasked in one of our stakeholder sessions to consult with CBE, which is the Council for the Built Environment. And indeed we did. I'm happy to report back to say that we found each other. There's an understanding of the need that consultants need to be registered so that we can monitor their development, progress, transformation, as been discussed. And the idea really, as I said, we're looking forward into an industry where we can link our consultants with the projects and the work that is happening. As a regulator, we are interested in knowing who's who in the zoo and who's doing what, so that we can then have interventions in the future. We can't intervene when we do not know what people are doing, what consultants are doing, and where they're working. So that's the whole idea. The built environment, and I think their chair is here, the Council for the Built Environment, we found each other, we are in the process, and we are collaborating with them to try and find a mechanism that will best suit the professionals and also suit the issues that we have raised as the regulator around the uniformity, procurement, the risk of consultants, fly-by-night consultants, all of those things we're trying to package together with the CBE, and I'm confident with the chair of the CBE being here, I'm not sure if he can see me, that we'll find a solution to that. So that is work in progress. On the second issue, I think the one was just a comment. I largely agree. And just to touch on something, I think maybe master builders can come into it too, because you also spoke about SMME development and those issues. I think the whole issue around us, CIDB, our contribution in terms of changing our registration criteria and also changing our act is also to facilitate for the growth of the youth, the development of the SMMEs. As I said, I think one of the interesting changes that we are making is that the youth are unemployed, but you'll find that a lot of youth are educated and they're sitting at home. And we've been asking ourselves, is the youth a greater risk than someone who doesn't know anything about construction, who enters into a grade 1 or 2? We have youth who are educated. Should we not then take away and say, maybe if you have a certain qualification, immediately you get grade 3? And of course, that is all in trying to ensure that the youth are participating in the industry and, of course, professionalizing. It's been 20 years since CIDB has been established. It's time that construction belongs to those who are in construction. I'm not sure the other question, Program Director, was talking about adjudication being low. I'm not sure what adjudication being low means. But in terms of scrapping contracts, no. CIDB is not scrapping any contracts. I'm not sure whether I need to express my personal view. I'm against these international contracts, your FIDIC and so on. I'm a JBCC, my blood is JBCC and GCC. So I think whilst we are at the helm, I think we are really supporting the JBCC. It's a South African contract, and I think it speaks to South African issues. And in my opinion, it's far better than the others. It's got detail, pays attention to detail from a QS point of view. Issues of escalation are dealt with, which other contracts don't really deal with. So, I do think it's from a cost perspective, the JBCC is perhaps the best out of what I've seen. And we are developing countries. Cost of construction needs to be efficient. And I think the JBCC assists us in doing that. So I think I've just left one question where I'm not clear about the adjudication being low. Arbitration. Adjudication being low? Oh, law. I'm not sure what that. Can you repeat the question for me, please?
There's an act for arbitration that's in circulation. So having it similar to the UK, where it's part and parcel and it's standard into contracts, so that employers don't fiddle with the contract under the dispute resolution procedures. Because what tends to happen is that employers scratch out the proposed dispute resolution procedures, which JBCC also proposes: adjudication, arbitration, and litigation. They tend to go straight to litigation to deter a contractor from pursuing the entitlements. So whenever there's a dispute, it goes directly to litigation, and SMMEs don't have the money to go to a court to resolve a simple dispute of payment. So CIDB, I think, can play a role in that to avoid, so that employers don't fiddle with contracts.
Okay, thank you. I think for us, it's difficult for us to interfere with a private relationship between two parties who are in a contract. However, to address your problem, we've actually raised issues around it. I think I've mentioned the issue of an ombuds, which is specifically designed. We are looking at the feasibility of it to look at actually award of contracts, which I take it you're referring to the adjudication and the incorrect award, and also the issue of payments. Those are the areas that the ombuds would be looking at, again, to try and cut costs for the contractor. So, in a way, we're addressing the issue, but perhaps not as directly as you would want us to. Thank you.
Colleagues, we've completely run out of time. So I'm going to invite on stage the overall program director, Mekile Mteto, to come and close the session officially and to give us direction in terms of what happens from here on. I would like you to please once again give the panel a very warm round of applause for their presentations. and I'm sure that they're still around. So after this, we can still have engagements, one-on-one engagements, just to delve deeper into some of the issues that they have raised. It's been an absolute pleasure coordinating this and running this session. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you. Snap opportunity, photo opportunity.
Yes. Portfolio of evidence, Gregor. Thank you very much. Another round of applause, please, for our final panelists. And quite an engaging one. Where are my comrades? Okay. What's our comrade? Deputy Chair. Yeah. Oh, wow. What a beautiful day. Well spent. Yeah, I don't think I would have been anywhere else better than being here. And our great appreciation to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. I would have wanted to go and do the summary of each and every panel discussion that has taken place, but that's going to take us some time. Let me just reassure you that all the presentations will be available on our website, and Tseho will ensure that as she has taken the email addresses, we will be able to receive the presentations for those of you that have joined the sessions a bit late. But in terms of the resolutions that I could draft out of each and every one of the discussions that had been done consolidated, we started off the day with the chair of the JBCC giving us the background, because it's quite important for us to know where do we come from, for us to determine where are we going. We are also blessed with the presence of the minister virtually, Minister Kubai, and we spoke about the new urban agenda. So out of that, we need to have an active engagement and participation of the built environment practitioners. Therefore, we'll need to have a follow-up meeting with the Department of Human Settlements to discuss practical solutions to human settlements as a driver for socio-economic development. CEO Rakesh, I'm doing this for you so that at least you can be able to work up on an action plan as to where to from here. Secondly, we need to have more visibility of the JBCC through the interaction and training programs and its products, including the online purchases of our documents and new versions as they come on board. Thirdly, we need the use of dispute resolution and contract dispute resolution as a mechanism alternative to litigation on matters that can be resolved through either mediation, arbitration, or both. So we'll need more conversation about that to sensitize the industry about the alternative mechanization that are there to resolve problems. Fourthly, government and private sector need to work collaboratively to ensure that skills development occurs, especially future skills that are required for professionals, contractors, and artisans for a coherent recovery plan for SA's infrastructure future. And lastly, the built environment must leverage the value chain opportunities presented by energy crisis recovery, total cost of ownership in infrastructure to address the challenges that are faced specifically by the SMMEs and the built environment in totality. So those are the few resolutions that I have been able to garner, and then we'll work on an action plan as the JBCC and inform you, ladies and gentlemen, about the programs that we're going to be working towards and also discussing as part of our strategy going forward. I would not have done my duty if I've not been able to do the vote of thanks as we are coming to the end of our program. And our heartfelt gratitude as the Board of Directors of the JBCC goes to the Minister of Human Settlements, Mamu Honorable Kubai in absentia, for having squeezed us into her busy schedule today, as we know that she was down in Cape Town to discuss government issues of the day. We want to also appreciate the Association of Arbitrators, who have been our platinum sponsors. Can we just give them a round of applause for supporting our event today? We also want to thank the CIDB. I'm hoping that they have paid, ne? CEO, Yanas Pelani, Yanas. CIDB, the BBCPE, and the COD for their sponsor for our event. Quite appreciated. We can give them a round of applause. Our esteemed moderators, Mme Kidiboni Tsilwane, Mr. Paul Khole, and Mr. Gregory Mufokeng, a round of applause. Our subject matter experts, whom we could not have been able to deliver this successful conference without, Mr. Rakesh Singh, Mr. Cliff Haim, Advocate Pierre Rousseau, SC, Advocate Eric Dun, SC, Dr. Sitsabo Dlamini, Mr. Refilwer Lidija, Mr. Stephen Kaplan, Advocate Yad van der Walt, SC, Mr. Kulile Nzo, Ms. Huse Molishe, Mr. Chris Campbell, and Mr. Musa Shangas. A round of applause for our experts. Furthermore, we would like to thank our special engine at the JBCC from the office under the leadership and the stewardship of the beautiful lady. Can you please stand up? Let's give you a round of applause. That is Tejo and Angela. They are the engine behind us, the wind beneath our wings as the board of directors, as the JBCC. As they say, dynamites come in small packages. Very small machinery, but very working. But in any case, they are women, so what do you expect? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the JBCC board and the board of directors, and thank you to the chair of marketing for ensuring that this event does take place. Our member constituencies, thank you for your continued support. But above all, I wanted to give you guys, ladies and gentlemen, a big, big, big round of applause for yourselves. Just for making it, just for being disciplined, just for looking ravishingly beautiful. I sound like Somis. Beautiful and handsome and so professional and staying the course. And also thank myself. Phew, how can I forget? Thank you to me for being an unpaid program director, for the record. Anyway, as they say, you don't pay the fish for swimming, so I'm here just doing the job. Ladies and gents, we are coming to the end of our program, and thank you once again to even our technical team, to even the people that had joined us via online. I did not get any questions from them. I'm not sure whether they muted or what had happened, but I hope they did enjoy the sessions as much as we did. We've got the information now. Let's go out there. Let's put things into plan and stop being a complaining sector. Let us change our complaint into solutions and provide the solutions that this country does actually need. I am told that we need to leave this room so that they can be able to transform it into a nice gala dinner, and our gala dinner is going to start exactly at 6 o'clock sharp. So it would be great for us to go refresh, those of us that want to go and refresh, spray ourselves again. And then when I come back with my long hair, don't get confused. It's part of the it's part of the agenda. So don't be stressed and say, no, man, it can't be her. She had very, very short hair earlier on. As we usually say, you don't claim a woman by the color of her hair. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Flip my Stories 8. Flip my Stories 8. Yeah. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to thank the illustrious, beautiful program director, Meki Lem Tetwa. Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm wondering, how do we live without singing a happy birthday song to JBCC? I'm hoping that in the next session, please don't forget. Thank you. How?